Yeah, so I found the first piece of writing that I
Mhm.
found that you wrote. I would say, I think it was 3 or 4 months ago, or maybe a little
Mhm.
bit less than that. Um, it was Bitcoin is consciousness raising technology and the
Oh,
path
yes.
toward enlightenment. And I read that. Well,
Yes.
one, just the title in general was very just capturing for attention.
Mhm.
And so I read that, and personally, I thought the way that you wrote this piece was magical. You were able to kind of convey how Bitcoin, being in open source software, can also help with kind of assisting people with thinking outside of themselves and on a different level of self awareness, so that they can, empower themselves, but also make a step towards self actualization and
Yes.
becoming a better version of themselves. And that was
Definitely. Yes.
that
Yes.
that yeah, and that was what kind of intrigued me about Bitcoin. It wasn't. I mean, we all want to strive towards security in regards to our own wealth, but
Mhm.
um, you know, there's also a fundamental value of making just empowering yourself internally. And for me, I uh, value relationships in a big way as well. And so
Mhm.
um, being able to dive into the profession of Unchained Capital and Bitcoin made it easy for me to find like-minded individuals
Yes.
that had this, uh, foundation of principles and virtues and values. So, um, but
Yes.
anyways, before we dive maybe into that article, I would love for you to
Mhm.
just introduce yourself on, maybe like your personal background, where you came from and how you stepped into the Bitcoin space. Um,
Okay. So I first found out about Bitcoin at the end of 2010 when WikiLeaks, the whistleblowing site, decided to use Bitcoin as a way to circumvent the financial blockade. And at that time, after organization released the publication relating to U.S. illegal wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the, basically the WikiLeaks has became a target of political retaliation. So the U.S. State Department um, pressuring the payment processing companies like PayPal, Bank of America, Visa, Mastercard, to basically stop, the transactions, the money that would have gone to WikiLeaks. And then, Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, basically kind of he understood what Bitcoin is. So he kind of proposed the idea of using Bitcoin, right? So that kind of intrigued me so much that it's like, first of all, it kind of revealed what the financial system is and how money functions in existing system, and it functions as an instrument of control. And prior to that, I didn't really pay attention to finance, or I didn't even think about what money is. But then this kind of a particular user case demonstrated by WikiLeaks really made me think about like the essential nature of money, and then how Bitcoin could be used to counteract that kind of force of oppression. So that's kind of how I initially was introduced to Bitcoin. But then, early on, Bitcoin really was like a money for geeks, and nobody knows, or it's the kind of weird money on the internet, and it's never gonna be. People say it's never gonna be um, adapted, at the wide scale, and so I wasn't really taking it seriously. But then, I think by the time, I think in 2013 or so, I kind of started to kind of became very fascinated by it. And at that time, I found Andrea Antonopoulos, and you know him, but he's a very eloquent speaker, and so I and he used to live in the Bay Area, and I live in the Bay Area. So there was this event, speaking event, and that I was invited to, and so I went to see him speak, and then he gave a kind of a 15-minute short presentation of what Bitcoin is, and that basically changed my life. I mean, literally, it's like I was able to see a totally different future. There was this light bulb, and that this is it. This is going to change the world. This is a revolutionary invention. And so then I thought, I just have to understand this. And I kind of dropped everything I was doing at the time. I mean, not quite everything, but, like I was like, okay, I need to commit myself to this technology. And so I think in 2013, I was kind of more focused on Bitcoin and dedicated myself to, trying to organize my life around the Bitcoin basically by then. And then, of course, like everybody else, I become like lunatic fringe, the crazy person that the people don't understand me. And, I kind of, people around me started to worry about me and the things like that. I'm sure that you have gone through that process as well. But fundamentally, I think my relationship to Bitcoin is basically through the cypherpunks philosophy. I think that my connection to cypherpunks philosophy, and that I don't, Bitcoin is the invention of money, but fundamentally I would look at it as an invention of free software created with certain, mindset that is characterized as cypherpunks philosophy. And then, cypherpunks believes that with strong cryptography, they wanted to create a software, free software that could shift the power, the balance of power between state and individuals. So that was their core belief. And like Adam Back, the cryptographer and the who was cited in Satoshi's white paper, he talks about how Bitcoin is the holy grail of cypherpunks, and I fully agree with him that this is really the most important thing that the cypherpunks have done. So so I've been kind of following the event, I guess, that's around the Bitcoin. And, when the block size debate got heated up in 2017, I covered that. I tried to understand the opposing narratives and trying to inform the Bitcoin space about the nature of this battle, basically. And that this battle is really, about, it's the struggle of power between individuals and the state. And how Bitcoiners can align themselves with the ethos that Bitcoin brings, so that was kind of something important to me that I spent a lot of time, trying to inform, I think, the community and also cover the events, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that process never ends, like it's just always something happening in this network. And now I think that transhumanism agenda is pushed forward by the World Economic Forum, and also the we are, I think, now pushing forward new renaissance of humanism, as is seen with the Bitcoin Renaissance 2.0, basically, that is happening centered around in El Salvador. So now we have, again, the contrasting forces, and so I think that now I am more, I am committed to continue to cover the event around the Bitcoin and, inform people what is at stake and what Bitcoin represents and how we as Bitcoiners can defend the values that Bitcoin brings.
Yeah. There's a lot to dive into. Once I was taking a look at your background, you've got a combination of great skills and pieces of knowledge. So psychology,
Right. And at the
journalism.
background, I mean, I studied liberation psychology. I studied psychology, and I studied the mainstream psychology initially, and I was in the clinical program, and I shifted. I was kind of disappointed with, I think, how the mainstream psychology, teaches what it means to be human. Basically, it's very what's the word? Disgusting, in my opinion. That it's I don't know, if you study psychology, you would understand that you have to first understand the behavioralism, and you study the B.F. Skinner's philosophy, and looking at human beings as just an extension of animals, and trying to reduce complexity of human beings into kind of at the animal level, comparing us with rats and pigeons and things like that, and then, in my opinion, the behavioralism really denies the core of what it means to be human, which deeply involves, I think, our feeling and capacity for creativity, imagination, all of those things, and reducing us to just like animal at the to animal level, that kind of trying to explain about us as we are just simply operating out of seeking for pleasure and avoidance of pain, basically, like animals do. So then I was very much disillusioned with psychology, and then I found new field of psychology called liberation psychology and depth psychology. So I was exposed. So fortunately, I was exposed to alternative view of humanity. So that's kind of like my background, and then finding Bitcoin. Basically, Bitcoin allowed me to incorporate, I think, everything I've learned, and defend, I think, humanistic values. I think ultimately defend what it means to be human. And it's become more and more clear over time. I mean, initially, like, I couldn't really articulate, why I'm into Bitcoin, like somebody who studied psychology, and then, I got Ph.D. and then people think that, or like even my professor tells me, so Nozomi, what's about Bitcoin? How is Bitcoin related to liberation psychology? And I couldn't quite explain how, but over time, especially now with the rollout of CDBCs and the the agendas of those who are pushing these centrally controlled digital currencies, right, become so clear, and I now can, with confidence, I can say that Bitcoin relates to liberation psychology. Bitcoin is all about defending humanistic values, and as a psychologist, that's what I believe we are trying to do. So I feel I can now talk to my professor, and then probably more able to explain how Bitcoin and the liberation psychology is related, I guess.
Yeah. I think I've heard you speak to how modern society teaches psychology, and how there is this behaviorist idea to, and I don't think a lot of people, even myself, I mean, I have dived into philosophy and psychology books. I read a decent amount, but I haven't spent enough time to really grasp modern day psychology. And I think I think diving into how this behaviorist approach, you mentioned Yuval Harari, the author of Sapiens, which I read probably 3 or 4 years ago, prior to ever even getting into Bitcoin. It was an interesting book and a history lesson, but I have noticed that in a few of your publications, you've mentioned him a few times, and he seems to be an advocate for calling us hackable animals. And so
Yes.
I didn't actually realize this aspect about him. I enjoyed his book for a little bit, but I didn't really think there were maybe blind intentions that he had that would lead humanity down a road of potentially not offering people to express themselves creatively through their own imagination. And it seems like he's treating it more so like we have the technology to hack human beings. And so, as I described in a few of my writings, but also just to give a high level overview, my views and my mind shifted drastically during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So my
Yes.
job, I lost my job. I started to view the social polarity and just uprise of commotion between the George Floyd riots, but then also seeing, unvaccinated or vaccinated, these different conflicts that people had. And to me, it just seemed pretty obvious that this was somewhat of an instigation that mainstream media was infiltrating and displaying. It was constantly on mainstream media all the time. And it also was a moment where I recognized this really unhealthy portrayal of the George Floyd riots, but also and what I mean by that is instigating conflict and not trying to bring out a solution in a peaceful and I think wise description to society. Alongside of that, I realized I watched a documentary called The Social Dilemma. So I was combined my knowledge with propaganda, but also the evolution of propaganda within centralized technology companies like Facebook and Twitter, where they have complete access to the algorithms that essentially control your news feed. So seeing this control and manipulation within our social media technology companies, the growing implications of mandating vaccines across the nation, this really concerned me at the time, and so I was trying to figure out where I could step in to maybe provide just a better solution, or trying to figure out where my role and my purpose was too at the same time. Because I was seeing all of this kind of disruption, losing my job personally, and then I found Bitcoin, and so I got into traditional finance. And when I, months prior to getting this job and into traditional finance, I wanted the job very badly. But then once I learned about Bitcoin, I wanted to get into the Bitcoin space. And the implications of what Bitcoin could do for individual freedom is something that I don't think people recognize nowadays. And it's very important for people to understand that. And I think that your knowledge, your Substack writings are like poetry. I love it. It's fantastic. And I think that, really getting into highlighting how psychology is displayed and taught in America and across, into different parts of the world, but also recognizing how technology is becoming more and more centralized and leaning into totalitarianism. I think it's really a unique combination that you display for people to recognize. And I think it's important to explain why should people care about this, and what is the solution, which we know the solution is Bitcoin, but not people can't really make those connecting dots. So that's a huge reason why I wanted to speak to you and display your knowledge and what you've been doing.
Yes. I mean, solution is basically action of human beings, the network of, human beings who can feel, basically, who know how to feel, and using Bitcoin as a tool, So I think it's, we hear often in this space that, many people say Bitcoin fixes this, and then there is this kind of a more passive element of, I'm going to just huddle and not do anything. And, automatically like something, Bitcoin is going to just change the world, But that's not the case, I think, it's just the human beings who use, Bitcoin is a tool, it's a very, very powerful tool. And it's really up to us human beings who understand the value of freedom, and freedom as a prerequisite of us developing a capacity for love, and for us, basically human beings to, basically defend, what it means to be human. And without, I think, Bitcoin, I don't think that we can meaningfully, fight this battle. So I think, but at the same time, I think it's important for us to remember that Bitcoin is just a tool, So, so I just wanted to kind of, let people see, I think, what Bitcoin presents, and also encourage people to have hope, and feel empowered to stand up for themselves, I think. So that's kind of what drives me, my writing, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
And in my Substack, I can kind of really write more and explore a deeper aspect of events, and it's a little bit esoteric, Some of the writings could be kind of esoteric, I think, but I kind of still hold myself back, and not quite, I think, maybe talk about what I really want to talk about, maybe just because I feel like it's too esoteric, it's just too deep that I don't think people can easily understand. And and especially the discourse that is pushed on social media, it stays at the socio-political level. It doesn't go deeper. We don't talk about consciousness. We don't talk about what it means to be human. We only kind of talk about external event, like these, there's this war, or this kind of, the incident, accident, or whatever that happened, and people just react to these outer events, and then we don't have time to actually go deeper into ourselves and examine, our relationship to these events and how we interpret these events, or all of those more kind of philosophical, psychological dimensions. I think that I think social media as a platform doesn't offer that. So that's, but at the same time, I just feel like if I completely check out from social media, then I cannot connect with people. I cannot really talk to audience that I find really need to understand Bitcoin, I guess. So I'm still kind of grappling with that challenge, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. The use of social media, you can't really have lengthy conversations on Twitter. You can have certain debates I've seen here and there, but I think the podcasting platform is where you can have these types of conversations.
Yes, the more deeper conversation. Yeah. And I think I think what happens with Bitcoin is that as you go deeper into a rabbit hole, there is a certain kind of a shift of consciousness that happens, and which that this shift of consciousness really changes, I think, the way we look at ourselves, the way we think of ourselves as a person. So it's really kind of start to dismantle our ego identity, ego identity that is wrapped up with this fear culture, and that ego identity is so much to do with how you're perceived by people around you. And then, unless you are extremely lucky, for most of us, that self-image is not aligned with who you are as your true being. So that Bitcoin rabbit hole experience really kind of, I think, engages us with this journey, spiritual, psychological journey of dismantling our ego identity and to discover who we are as authentic beings. And I think that, you kind of touched on that in your writing, in your piece, that your personal journey of finding Bitcoin and how it's changed you. And then everybody has that kind of personal story, right? And how Bitcoin changes us. And like Max Kaido says, we don't change Bitcoin, but Bitcoin changes us. And that, I think that is in my opinion, I think it's a spiritual phenomenon. It's not just like Bitcoin is just the money and, that we become rich or whatever, it's really Bitcoin has certain something, that it's like almost like has a psychedelic effect, right? It's like a plant medicine that works on us, and that it calls us to become authentic and find the reason why we are here for, and each person has a different reason to be here. And, what we call as destiny or calling or, all kind of things that, the spiritual writings talk about. I think that's the essence of Bitcoin, and people can describe this essence of Bitcoin in many different terms, like, look at it from economic point of view or political point of view, or, but I think fundamentally, Bitcoin calls us back home, and and that the shift of consciousness in a sense that, like I just described, that changes how we look at ourselves, really, I think, changes how we operate in this world, and what that means is that I think that most of us operate with the paradigm that this external reality creates reality. What is out there in the physical domain, that's the reality, and we are interacting with it. But then we realize that it's actually the other way around. It's reversed. It's our subjective experience or the consciousness, precedes brain. I know it's kind of aesthetic here, but it's because the fiat system operates with this paradigm of materialism, basically, and that denial of consciousness and reducing consciousness into basically chemical activities in the brain. So that's their paradigm. So what that means is that, what's out there, what we perceive through five senses, it's the reality. And I think that the truth is, personally, I think it's actually consciousness precedes brain. And that it's actually, we do have the power to create reality, but I guess this is something that it's very hard to describe in language, but it's like the people who do psychedelics, for instance, or work with shamanism, that they come out of the experience saying that, wow, that this reality, we live in this dream-like state of reality. The reality we think absolute and fixed is not that absolute and fixed. It's like, it's like a dream. We are living in a dream, and then we are collectively dreaming up our own reality. And that changes, that awareness changes, how we live our life, because then we realize how our consciousness is participating in creating a certain reality, and we can start taking responsibility of our own creation, like how we create our own reality, and that is, I think that's kind of a profound shift of consciousness, and I think somehow Bitcoin is creating that kind of effect, on people, that and that it's not that drastic change. It's not like over time, like somebody wake up and then, wow, everything changes. It's not like that. It's kind of gradually working through, so that it's, I don't know if you have had that kind of experience.
Yeah. Well, so when I got into Bitcoin, I was right grateful that I received the proper resources of literacy. So I read the Bitcoin Standard first. I think Seyfedin does a great job
Yes.
intertwining how money as a technology is a medium of exchange that allows us to
Right.
have a peaceful means of transacting with one another and interacting with one another. And it has a
Right.
huge impact on every aspect of our lives. And how when you know, as I've mentioned in other episodes, and it's mentioned many times within the Bitcoin ethos, back in 1971, once we got off the gold standard, which was a more sound form of money technology, that led us down a pathway where we had a small group of people have access to an unlimited supply of money, and that unlimited supply, it does trickle down. There are implications of quantitative easing, printing more money. This is a secret tax that is debasing people's energy in a way. And what I mean by energy is their output of who they are is consistently being debased through the action of printing money. So if they are trying to fulfill their business, there's luckily the internet has allowed people to be able to be more creative with utilizing certain arts or creating different things. But not everyone has the tools and understandings to be able to kind of fight this inflationary environment.
Like low time preference, give us time to focus on what matters or take care of ourselves, basically.
Yeah. And I think that, Parker Lewis, he's one of he's an advisor at Unchained, but he has a great blog series, and I hope to have him on the podcast at some point to talk about one of them, which was Bitcoin is the Great Definancialization. And it discusses how the simple act of savings has completely left, our purview. You now have to be a financial advisor, or you have to hire a financial advisor to simply save away what you make from the occupation that you have. And so this is, restricting people's ability to elevate their consciousness because they're not able to really focus on what makes them who they are.
Exactly. Because, this debt monetary system enslaves us, and it basically prevents us from doing what we love to do. Most of us can't even ask ourselves a question of what we love to do, right? Like when we are young, we had this dream, like many of us have dreams, and many of us have this, I want to be like this, I want to be like that. But then when they are about to graduate from college, then they start to think about what they can do. They start applying for jobs and jobs that they don't care. And then they cannot even ask that question of what they love to do, right? So it's Bitcoin's the opposite. Bitcoin allow us to, pursue for things that we want to do, so that's a fundamental. And then that by doing what we love to do, certainly that enhances our consciousness, right? That when we are doing something we love to do, then we are happy, we are joyful, and that creates a ripple effect, that inspires other people around you and motivate other people to do the same. So that's a very good, instrument, I guess, right? I mean, of money. And our civilization has become such that at birth that we are the most joyous. And then as we grow older, then we become more miserable, right? So, and because of the money and the financial system that suppresses our creativity, that this kind of creates this kind of, civilization. And the Bitcoin does the opposite. Bitcoin basically preserves our right to experience joy and love, and it's, as we grow older, it magnifies more, So that's the kind of civilization that we want to create, right? So fundamentally, I mean, if when we are doing something we want to do, that's that's a simple formula, then I mean, that's when we raise consciousness. Like I said in my article, looking at Bitcoin as consciousness raising technology,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it is consciousness raising technology. I mean, it's, and if you look at Bitcoiners, they're happy, they're joyful, they're happy, they're hopeful. And if you look at, people who don't know about Bitcoin, they're pessimistic, they're fearful, and they don't love what they want to do. I mean, they don't love what they do. They spend 9 to 5, most of their time doing things that they don't care. So I mean, just comparison is just clear. Just that people don't have to understand the Bitcoin, but if you just compare Bitcoiners and no coiners, you can see the difference in their level, right? I mean,
Yeah.
then maybe I hope that some people would be interested in understanding Bitcoin. Some people would start asking questions. So what is Bitcoin? Why Bitcoiners are so alive? Why they're so excited about this technology? Why they are so much filled with joy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that could be, I think, a good way for people to understand. I mean, want to understand Bitcoin, because then, right? It's like Bitcoin is a magic pill. Maybe if you take it, then you also become joyful too. Right.
Yeah, the orange pilling effect. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, have you seen Bitcoiners who are miserable, like who are, I mean, I personally haven't met any Bitcoiners who don't have hope, or who are miserable, or who are, I mean, some of them are still working at the, working fiat jobs, and then they complain about these jobs, but fundamentally they're hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, just working for a Bitcoin company, at times I'm more on the operations side, right? But I do have the opportunity to speak with clients, and there's multiple times, and as well as some of the examples I've heard from my colleagues, they could talk for hours with our clients, because they're just so hopeful. But there's such a multifaceted amount of subjects that are around Bitcoin. I mean, just as you've mentioned, psychology, but technology, history. There's just so much to talk about, and there's been multiple times where I could just, it's like I have friends from back home that I've known since I was a kid, right? But I feel like I can connect on a deeper level with someone that I just met, because they have these fundamental principles, and and that their imagination just sparks up on what's in the horizon for society and for civilization. Because I think there is a subconscious feeling amongst everybody, for the most part, that something does feel wrong. And it really kicked in for me during COVID. And just the
Matrix,
social...
the Morpheus saying, like, there's something wrong, you have felt it all your life, right? It's a splinter in your mind, basically, that we all have this feeling that there's something wrong. But it takes a while for us to understand why we feel this way. And once we understand Bitcoin, the first things that the people start to understand is how fiat system works. Before we actually understand how Bitcoin works, most of us actually first learn how fiat system works and how money is used as an instrument of control. So that's I think the first step that everybody takes. And then obviously Bitcoin fixes this, right? Because it's the alternative. So not only we understand the problems, we now have solution. So that's, I think, Bitcoin, from that point of view, Bitcoin gives us hope. So no amount of political, social analysis of what's wrong with the world. I mean, that's only makes us be more pessimistic, because we don't have any solution. Brilliant scholars or activists, they know how the world is messed up and why. They can explain to you why, but then they don't have solution. Like, and then if we were to say, hey, Bitcoin's a solution, that they can't see it. Many of them cannot see it, unfortunately, because their mind is conditioned in a certain way.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see people that they have different characteristics and different motives and ambitions, and they you would look at them and say they seem to have the Bitcoiner um, you know, features of within their character and their beliefs, but
Mm-hmm.
there's there's some kind of mental block or mental model that they're um, I'm trying to understand it.
Well, I think that, yeah, from my perspective, I think that I came to kind of my personal conclusion is that in order for us to really embrace Bitcoin, you have to let go of levers of control. You have to embrace the, ethos of decentralization. And, it's challenging for us because one way or the other, I think most of us want to control things, like we want to control our life. We want to feel like we are in charge of our life, like we know what we're doing. Or like when we are in a relationship with someone, I think part of us kind of want to control the other person, want the other person to do what we want, him or her to do. And Bitcoin really teaches us that we really need to let go of that urge to control things and people around us. And this includes our wishes to change the world. I mean, right now that I heard this. John Kerry. He was at the WEF annual meeting, and then he was expressing how grateful he is to be a part of this selected group of people, and that he feels like he has this task to save the planet, and that he was kind of talking about how like he's like saving this planet, and I think if we are not careful, we easily fall into that kind of mentality of changing the world or saving the planet, or and it's arrogance in some ways that for us to think that somehow this Mother Earth has been living for a long time, and that for us to somehow to think that we can save the planet, excuse me, that's kind of hubris of humankind, I think. And in many ways, for us to think that we can change the world, or so that kind of want to control things, want to change things, I think Bitcoin urges us to look at ourselves and make us realize that the only thing we can change is ourselves. But that change, that each person makes internally has a profound effect. That would change the world. It's a kind of inside out. It's the changes I think our orientation in the world, and then I think the more the people who those who understand the programs and that they are driven to change the world, it's harder for them to let go of that control, and to kind of say, I can all I have to do is to just mind my business, to just take care of myself, right? And not to so much worry about what's happening in the world, or not to even think that I can change the world, so that is harder, for some people, because and that their ego is invested around their identity that has to do with being an activist, or especially the activists. I think it's harder, right? If you spend your entire life being an activist, try to change, try to save the planet, or try to stop the war and things like that, and all of a sudden, you are told that you don't have to do this. Solution is here. You just have to focus on living your life and be happy and joyful. I think people have some kind of, it would be harder that they would start asking who they are, once their ego identity is stripped away. And that's, I think, what Bitcoin does. And that, because of it, I think it's harder, like I said, for people to accept Bitcoin,
Yeah. Man, a lot of ideas fireworked in my mind when you went through what you just said. I think the first thing that I would remark on is, we have a deep trauma within our society. There's a lot of trauma. that I've noticed within my own personal circle, but also day-to-day life outside
Yes.
within the digital sphere of recognizing what's going on in our world. And
Yes.
I've been reading multiple different books. I tend to divert my attention from book to book sometimes, but one is called The Myth of Normal, and I think it's by Gabor Mate.
Oh, I
And
know that.
yeah, he starts to talk about this, and it seems that there is, to his hypothesis, he diagnoses almost every mental illness as a uh, belief in oneself. Or I think he says that there is a way for us to push past some of our some of the issues that we have within ourselves, mentally, psychologically. And I mean, since the major world wars that we've had, World War One and World War Two, and it's just been this forever war scenario, which has propelled United States and federal intelligence agencies to continue this power grasp and maintaining of power through these forever wars and through the petro dollar system that we have. It's just perpetuating trauma within individuals. It obviously affects families for people that go to war and and many other aspects. And so and our fiat monetary system doesn't really give us the free time to be able to dedicate that on an individual basis. For me, I was able to really do some digging and work for myself. I'm actually really happy it happened prior to COVID. It literally happened in 2019. I was able to kind of leave my job and take a moment to really just be alone and sit with myself, go through some of the past traumas that I went through, and really understand why maybe I have these potent fears or different habits within myself. And it just took a lot of work to make improvements, but it does take time and space to be able to practice different habits, to read different books that allow you a different perspective. And not many people have that time and space because of this goes into the fiat monetary system where we're incapable of saving aside enough money to be able to sit with ourselves alone for a period of time. And you're constantly trying to figure out how to obtain a certain amount of money through investing in companies that you don't really care about, but that they're going to make a large amount of profit. So I definitely would say that changing it's a very cliche saying, but your internal state is a reflection of your reality. And it's very important to focus on yourself before you try to go change the world. And it is a cliche, but it's very true from personal experience.
Yes. And I think that, what Bitcoin does is that it kind of awakens, I think, within us, love for ourselves, and I think our culture, punishes us, our will to act out of self-interest. And, that we have this, especially this Judeo-Christian dualistic morality that emphasizes on empathy and compassion for other people. And then somehow they punishes this value of self-interest, and the self-interest becomes synonymous with selfishness. And so that if someone wants to defend your own rights, or, someone wants to act out of, their own desire, somehow the society just tell us that we are selfish. And we've seen that during pandemic, right? That the people who want to defend their medical freedom, and that they were condemned by those who pushes certain medical procedure as being selfish, right? Like you are selfish because you don't care about other people. That's why you don't take this, you don't take them. And this is not the case. People are just defending the rights for freedom, medical freedom, for instance, right? So that kind of was very revealing to me, that to realize, wow, we live in a culture that really condemns this value of self-interest, and then the way they do this, of course, depicting it as being selfish, right? And then we are, and then the society pushes the value of empathy and cooperation and compassion, and then we are kind of socially pressured to cater to, I think, other people's need, and in expense of our own needs, And I think what Bitcoin does is the Bitcoin shift those values, cultural values, I think, and defends the value of freedom, and then I think this is, I think, greatest act of Satoshi, in my opinion, is that Satoshi found, or Satoshi somehow redeemed what is condemned in our culture as being selfish. And these are, our the certain capacity for, to take individual initiatives, capacity to act out of self-interest. They are not a bad thing, That's like we all, it's the foundation of organism, right? Foundation of our life. All creatures, they first have to preserve their life. That's the first thing. They have to defend their family. They have to defend themselves, their life, So if we negate or if we condemn that as being selfish, then we cannot even build, it's the first step. That it's a foundation. It's taken away from us, right? So I think that's what Satoshi did. Satoshi basically told us that it's okay. It's okay to act out of self-interest. That's not, you being selfish at all. So I think that is, I think, coded in, in Bitcoin, and then we are affected by that, and we start to care for ourselves, and perhaps maybe for many of us for the first time, because if we've been told that we shouldn't care for ourselves. If we start to care for yourself, then people or the society says, "Oh, you are just being selfish. You don't care about other people." And then, so once I think Bitcoin gives us opportunity to start caring for ourselves, start loving ourselves, and that leads to a profound lifestyle changes. Mm-hmm. Because then people start to, once you start to value yourself, then you start to look around your life and then say, why am I in this relationship? This person doesn't value me, right? Like you also talked about that in your writing, that you started to examine your relationship with other people, right? Why am I dating this person? Why am I working for this job? You see, so I think that's the phenomena that we are seeing, that people start to kind of ask questions that previously they never even asked, or they never even wondered in the first place. And then step by step, you realize, you know what, this person doesn't value me. Mm-hmm. And this job doesn't use my skill, or my supervisor doesn't appreciate me, or my coworkers don't even know who I am, mm-hmm. And then my girlfriend doesn't understand me, or like my boyfriend, what he likes is just how I look, or, people start to ask those questions. And then that, once you start to value yourself, then, you can make better choices, You can have a better relationship, you can find a better relationship, you can start eating better, you can start exercising, you can start to take care of your body, all of that stuff, So that's, I think, what we are seeing in the Bitcoin space, is that, people, started to care for themselves and start to love themselves. And that makes a huge difference. I mean, that's a starting point of transforming the society,
Yeah. and COVID was really a catalyzing moment, I think, for a lot of people too, at least for me. But
Yes.
I also noticed it in my friends and my family and society. They knew something was deeply wrong. And as we both
Right.
know, and many of other Bitcoiners know, that we live in a
Mm-hmm.
materialistic society where we value just regular just things. We don't really take
Mm-hmm.
a lot of value into our own internal souls, or trying to improve our physical health. And my last guest that I just had on, he goes by the name of Texas Slim, and he's creating the Beef Initiative, which is a decentralized
Oh, yes.
network
Mm-hmm.
that you can pay in fiat, but you can also pay in Bitcoin, and you can directly do this with your rancher. So there's a good portion of us here at the Bitcoin Commons here in Austin, Texas, where a lot of us just buy a half cow or a full cow, and we'll pay in Bitcoin to our rancher. And this rancher has the capability of storing their value in Bitcoin, and growing their business, and creating better relationships. But at the same time, we're all here able to focus on our health as well. And it's really hard for people. The reason why I bring that up is because it's almost you have to be very particular with your attention in order to remain healthy in America nowadays, because most of the things that you eat or drink are injected with some synthetic ingredient that is causing a metabolic disease. And so now it's like you go back to the behaviorists. It's almost as if like it seems that we've got certain foundations like the Diabetes Foundation or Heart Association that are sponsored by Coca-Cola, or sponsored by some the cause of these illnesses. And it almost, to me, I mean, I've noticed in one of your podcasts, I think it was with Robert Breedlove, you noted that you think that these people, or the people that are leaders or within bureaucratic organizations, they seem to be blind. And I think that's a really good way to put it, because we do have a lot of people in the Bitcoin space that say a bunch of evil people are running the world. And I don't know. I mean, that I think it's a to look at it from a perspective of, some people we are human beings. We have a finite amount of mental bandwidth to be able to broaden our horizon and scope. And some people might just have these restricted, narrow mental models of life. And they are blind to how we can really improve on the health of society. But we've just been lagging these industrial institutions in a way that's just that they're no longer working, and we needed to kind of break out of this. And I mean, it's very important for people to kind of wake up and to be able to to value themselves, to self-actualize, so that they can then spread that in a ripple effect to other people in society, instead of just focusing on external things for some kind of ease or pleasure. I think it's very important, and I love that you bring that up in some of your writings.
Right. I think the problem is that those people who have more narrow focus and don't really understand, I think, or have a broader view of what it means to be human. That the problem is that they somehow place themselves in a position of power, and that they are dictating the world, basically, how everybody should live. That's the problem, But fundamentally, I think that their perspective is valid. I think this is an important point. Instead of, I think that they have valid perspective. It's just one way of looking at things, and that perspective needs to be placed in a dialogue. So that's, I think, what we need to have in our society, so that those who agree with that perspective, they can maybe create their own alternative network, and they can do whatever they want to do in that network, right? They could use CDBCs, and then they could be happy just using it. And then those who don't agree with it, we would have alternative network like Bitcoin, and then we all can coexist peacefully. We don't have to kind of destroy each other, So I think that's, So peaceful coexistence is the solution, I think. And you know, and it's just it's easy to look at them as kind of evil beings. I mean, but at the same time, you know, once you realize that it's almost like, wow, they can't just simply see it. You know, it's like they're like a 5-year-old who just hasn't grown. I mean, lacking something, you know, and that they can't see things in a way that we do. And we have to simply understand how they are different, right? And so how they are different, how they view the world, and so that understanding is very important, and to recognize the difference is important, and at the same time, don't condemn them. Just, you know, I mean, just as how we treat 5-year-old. The problem we're having is that we are treating them like a full adult, and treating them like, you know what I mean? Like, if we know that they're like 5-year-old, I mean, why do we take them seriously? You know, they're irrelevant. I mean, it's just a 5-year-old doing something, you know? So that, I think that's important. And so then we don't have to be fearful. Like, we don't, you know, they just, we are just giving them power by us not knowing how different they are. And so we are actually giving them power, in my opinion.
Yeah. And having transparency of communications and understanding is vital. You know, being able to focus on freedom of expression and avoiding these centralized social media platforms. I mean, for our society to be able to have that ecosystem consistently be narrowed and controlled and restricted doesn't allow us to be able to, you know, show these different mind frames of other people. So I think it's really important for us to be able to, you know, have these alternative social media platforms to be able to pursue that. And, you know, it seems like another big topic of focus that you've had in your life, and you've already kind of displayed this, but, you know, journalism towards transparency within our government. It doesn't seem like we have that right now. You know, Elon Musk has taken over Twitter, and some of the, you know, actions he's taken is to allow different journalists to be able to gain access to files of what was going on during the past couple of years, which gives me hope in regards to, you know, aside from Bitcoin, it's also just this transparency of, well, our government has,
and I think that, I mean, the WikiLeaks is what, you know, it's an organization that defends transparency, and that, you know, in many ways, I think WikiLeaks revitalized journalism and enabled the First Amendment at the global scale for the first time in the history. And, you know, it really disrupted the media landscape. But I think that now we are, in my opinion, I mean, journalism is important, but I think we are moving into a different framework, different paradigm, in my opinion, is that, you know, journalism, I think, functions within this idea of, you know, the balance of power, basically. So we have this government that has power, and then citizens, you know, the journalism being protected under the First Amendment. You know, the media was meant to work as a watchdog, right? Watchdog for government. But that whole kind of setup was based on this, you know, like I said, this balance of power. And then now with Bitcoin, we can create a completely different system of governance, which distribute the power across the network, so that we do not actually have to do this, you know, this checks and the balance of power. In a network that doesn't have the power, in a network that doesn't have levers of control, there is no power to check, you know, and Bitcoin allows us to do that at the protocol level. So that it's distribute, you know, the distributed network basically doesn't have, right? It's dissolved the levers of control. It's completely decentralized. So that it's, so I think this notion of checks and the balance of power become the things of the past. So I think Bitcoin gives us a tool to innovate the system of governance in a way that we never, even thought was possible. And it's actually much better than the Constitution, in my opinion. Constitution was certainly significant invention, and I really appreciate founding fathers for what they have done. But I think we can do better, and and then the WikiLeaks even said that, Julian Assange even said that the purpose or goal of WikiLeaks is to create a society that doesn't need WikiLeaks. So that's it, Bitcoin leads us to create that kind of society. We don't have leaders. We all become leaders, and there is no head in the decentralized network, and it's a transparent network that we don't have to check and balance the power. I know it sounds idealistic, but I think that's the model I think Bitcoin brought us, and it's up to us to actually use it to create a better system of governance.
Yeah,
so
it's almost as if the checks and balances are baked in, without actually having some actual portrayal of. You could say, yeah, I don't know. It seems
because
like
all levers of control. That system, even the Constitution, it's corruptible in nature. Because of the fact that all human beings are corruptible.
Right.
So it's I think, this traditional system of checks and balance of power isn't effective in the long run. I think we can create a better system that doesn't that basically dissolves the levers of control. That's it. So I think that and I think that's we started to see that with this notion of citizen journalism, for instance. Nowadays, like, people with iPhones and from everywhere, they can just start reporting, instead of like journalists, like professional journalists reporting things. So I think things are changing, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree. And there was a slight pessimism from my perspective during 2020, and I'm sure a lot of people, prior to 2020 kicking in, had some pessimism. But I think that I've been seeing this momentum of, as you stated, citizen journalism, and then this ethos, this phenomena of Bitcoin being passed on to a scalable level. It seems like this game theoretical scenario will play out, and that's the beauty of diving into these multifaceted topics surrounding Bitcoin is game theory as well, and seeing El Salvador.
Yeah, and I think that also, I think our society, our culture emphasizes on reason or rationality, or that we have to, like, in order for us to know something, like, we have to turn to the expert, or we have to read the newspapers, or we have to get information from the outside. But I think what Bitcoin teaches us is that we have this innate capacity of knowing, which comes through intuition, and intuition is a direct knowledge, and so we all have that kind of intuitive knowledge, and I found it interesting because in the wake of global financial crisis in 2009, when the government started to bail out the banks, and then and at that time, like, public in the U.S., like, they didn't quite understand what was wrong, but then many of them expressed that they kind of felt it's fundamentally wrong for the government to be bailing them out, bailing banks out, and they couldn't understand, they couldn't rationally explain why, because in the mainstream media is saying it's the right things to do, but then at the guts level, they knew this is wrong. And we all have that kind of experience in our life that we cannot rationally explain. The old data that tells me that this is correct and this is accurate, but at the same time, something doesn't sit with me. That and then we often kind of experience that with in a relationship, like when you're in relationship with someone who is actually harmful for you, and then the outer things, looks all great or whatever, and then but you cannot point a finger at something, but you know this is not working. So that's a kind of a good example of things that we do have, a way of knowing things that we don't have to depend on things outside of us. I mean, of course, that these data and stuff become very helpful, but that would be used as a kind of a confirmation or something instead of, just depending on them. And I think, and then once I think each person develop connection to intuition, that's it. Each person can claim individual sovereignty. Nobody can control you, and that's what those who want to control us, like psychopaths, they don't want us to know this intuitive capacity that we have. And so that's why they create this media organization or finance or all of those things so that we can depend on, rely on, and then they claim themselves to be the authorities, and we give our power away to them. And we also, we always go to them and then ask them to tell us what we should do, whether we should vote for this president or this politician or do this or that, So I think that's what they, ruling class, do not want us to know. First of all, they do not want us to know. Second of all, they do not want us to cultivate our connection to intuition, because once we have this and once we start trusting ourselves, that's game over. They cannot control us. And that's the foundation of Bitcoin. Don't trust, verify. And that don't trust, verify, that the way we trust is through intuition. The network is each 10 minutes, it's going through the intuitive process, in my opinion, and it's mathematically ensured, but it's allow us to connect with intuition. So, so then basically, once we start to trust our intuition and work with our own intuitive knowledge and each engage in this don't trust, verify processes, then we become individual sovereign, and we become, we cannot be controlled. That's it,
Yeah, for sure. A part of me also feels like now more than ever we need to start taking more sovereignty with our own actions in many parts of our lives. One of them being hosting your own data in a way, like you're changing the trusted third party for cloud computing, smart devices, but also as we mentioned before, with your health, with certain skills, gardening, all these different things. It's scary to see my generation and younger generations be swept up into just letting any entity dictate how they're going to, get a result, right? Like they don't really practice within themselves on getting results. They're just relying on multiple, trusted third parties or different institutions to really, carry on different actions. Granted, I know there's tons of different things in life that, are important for you to learn. And it might be difficult to learn many different things, but I think that over time, at least what I've observed here in the Austin area, is people really taking control over their lives in different ways. And it started with relationships, our health, and recently we had I had a discussion too with the company called Start9. It's similar to
Embassy.
Yeah, Embassy OS suite. So taking control of your own data. And I mean, now more than ever, and this seems to be more of a recent topic that you mentioned in some of your Bitcoin Magazine articles, is central bank digital currencies having absolute control over over your life. And people think, well, this is just convenient. This is just convenient. We have
Right.
this computer in the palm of our hands,
Mm-hmm.
and we can really just, with the click of a button, get any task or thing done, which is great. I mean, times are great. Times are good. They're prosperous. We're flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a risk for
Right.
abuse towards this. I mean,
Yes,
saw
yes,
a huge
yes.
billboard here in Austin. This billboard just was Google, and it said,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you control, or it was, you have a smart home. We are the internet, whatever. I think it was just an advertisement for their new smart, this evolution of smart devices being all in your home. And me
Mm-hmm.
and Matt had a conversation about this, how like they could change the temperature in your house, they could lock the doors in your house, they could, you know, control different
Mm-hmm.
parameters of your house. Not to say that we're there yet, but
Right,
that
right.
is
Yes.
coming, right? And so
Right.
I think it's very important to spread the message of leaning into your intuition, to understanding
Mm-hmm.
on how you can take more ownership within your life, because we're at a
Right.
very, trying moment in human civilization and human history where we do have to start scaling this. I think we have to scale the
Yes.
message, at least, is what I'm trying to say. And
Yes.
people like Matt Hill from Star Nine, they're doing it in their own way
Mm-hmm.
with sovereign computing. But then there's, I mean, like, even our own food system needs to be distributed
Mm-hmm.
in a much more hyper
Yes.
localism manner. There's just so much centralization everywhere, and
Yes. Centralization. Yes.
yeah, yeah,
So I mean, like, our culture, I mean, our society, basically, it doesn't teach us how to take care of ourselves, right? Because fundamentally, it denies the value of self-interest.
mhm,
But what if, like, what Bitcoin that did was really, it kind of restores the value of self-interest. So then, just imagine, like, when you're a child and you go to school, and then you are taught to take care of yourself. Like, you are taught, okay, you want to eat, you need to eat food. So can you grow your own food? And then can you do, and then build the skills that uh, allow you to take care of yourself. Basically, you can eat healthy, you can exercise, you can do meditation, you can learn how to listen to your intuition. All of those things that are centered around the value of self-interest. Then I think that we become strong person as an individual, right? Each person becomes strong, and then we could maybe help other person as well. The strong individuals who are capable of maybe helping others, which is different than, if we were taught to take care of other people, focus on other things, other people, and then and helping other people, or depending on other people to help you and things like that. Then we don't know how to grow food. We have to depend on big pharma. We are so disconnected from our body that we have to go see a doctor,
mhm,
and then ask doctors. Doctors, they only see you like for 10 minutes, right? And then you have lived with your body for like 25 years.
yeah,
You know your body more than your doctor does, right? Obviously. But then somehow, when you go to see a doctor, like, oh, he is an expert. This person has so much medical knowledge that I have to listen to this person. And then he might say, oh, you are this and you have to take this
mhm,
medication. And then part of you know that this person doesn't even see you as an individual, doesn't even understand you,
right,
you know. But then we override our intuition and then rely on things outside of us,
mhm,
and then say, okay, yeah, because you said so, I'm going to take this medication, and I believe in what you say, for instance. So I mean, this is an interesting thing, right? Like, how, maybe we all should learn to become our own doctors, you know and then maintain our connection with our body. So when we have like headache or we feel unwell, then we can ask our body, and try to have a relationship with our body, and ask, what is it that causing this,
mhm,
you know and start to take care of ourselves, instead of like immediately going to a doctor and ask them to fix us,
yeah,
you know so, and then the food too, like, it's just we go outside, it's just it's easy and then convenient, I guess.
Well,
And we are focused on working so hard that we don't even have time to prepare for our meal.
right.
We don't even know what's in our food, you know? And so that's just how society is organized, right? With central control. And now I think Bitcoin provides a tool for us to re-engineer our society. And based on based on the value of self-interest.
Right. And,
You know,
and that re-engineering too is the incentive structure of our money
right?
system, right? So Keynesian
Yes, yes.
theories were heavily weighed on, consuming and constantly getting
Mhm.
consumer demand, and so this has been facilitated within our, excuse me, the macroeconomic landscape, and that
Mm.
has, I think, you referencing our food being tainted with different things that really are just kind of fake commodities, or our
Yes,
doctors really just being, um, one, they don't have a personal relationship with their patients like they used
exactly.
to, but also they're incentivized to prescribe different drugs, and they're actually not even really, um, you know, they're not taking a
Medicine.
lot of time to yeah. I mean, they're they're heavily, I think, influenced by, there's health insurance companies and pharmaceutical drug
Right,
companies
right.
that are really incentivizing them to prescribe these things. But um,
Mhm.
and I think that does come down ultimately to our money system and the incentive structure that we are placing,
Mhm.
within these different really important parts of our society. Medicine
Mhm.
and healthcare and our food system, and
Yes.
just having this consistent manipulation and unethical money
Mm.
printing is causing this conglomeration of power and wealth, go towards a part of society
Mhm.
that is just not able to um, create and be in the best of interest of our health in regards to our nation and
Yes.
across the world. So
Right.
I
And
think,
I think that, yeah, I mean, the cypherpunks really, I think, understood the problems that we have in our society, and that they characterize it as basically they said that the battle is not left versus right, it's the individual versus state,
yeah,
and that they understood the value of individuality, that we human beings have innate, we each have individuality, that we are different, we are unique, and the freedom is necessary for us to develop that, each unique individuality, right? And
mhm,
then the state fundamentally look at us as masses. They treat us like basically animals. Like you and I are same to
mhm,
them, right?
mhm,
Those who run the system, they fundamentally see everybody the same.
yeah,
That they don't even remember your names. It's like, if you go to a public school, then the teachers don't even, even the good teachers, they are not even giving us space to get to know each person, So then we become just a masses, like nameless, faceless it, and that's how we are being treated at the fundamental level in our society. And I think that cypherpunks, they revolted against this, that they said that we are fundamentally individuals, unique individuals, and that we need to empower ourselves and defend our self-interest, And I think that Bitcoin was really the formidable tool that they came up with, and that now we have opportunity to use it to, claim our own individuality,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
It's really important to highlight the alternative way in which you can implement change as the cypherpunks did. So for people
Yes.
that don't understand, like there's some listeners that might not be in Bitcoin as much as we are. For instance, an example is the 2008 financial crisis, people waving
Mm-hmm.
signs down on Wall Street and protesting and trying to lobby Congress and politicians. But the cypherpunks were engineers, computer scientists that were able
Yes.
to build through code, developing software.
Yes.
And this creates change by implementing code and
Mm-hmm.
software,
Yes.
and that changes people around them and the ecosystem around you through the things that they've built. And
Yes.
that's extremely powerful to
It
recognize
is
amongst
powerful.
individuals, because a lot of people, I think subconsciously, the people that I've seen in my life, or certain people in my personal circle, they know that it would provide a great sense of purpose to be able to help bring change, right? Like, as we were discussing, everybody wants
Yes.
to have some kind of nice impact on the world.
Right.
And if you're able to internally take care of yourself, even,
Mm-hmm.
most people that feel comfortable with themselves and they feel healthy, they still might not know, how could I bring change to the world, because there's such, powerful institutions, or really bad things happening. How am I going to
Yeah.
affect this? And it's like, well, there are people that are developing code, or they're developing
Yes.
different types of companies that are going to impact society in a very beneficial way. And there's really nothing
Mm-hmm.
that these current leaders can do about it. They can adapt and evolve, or maybe create other things on their end to facilitate some kind of pushback, or
Mm-hmm.
order and control. But that's a special thing to highlight to people. And I wanted to also, for people that haven't read some of your writings, I loved how you incorporated cypherpunk, so cipher, CYPHER, which is for
Oh,
cryptography.
yes.
And then you also included
Um,
I think it was PSY.
Psychologist.
Yeah. So, like, trying to
Right.
incorporate this
Mm-hmm.
this idea of
Yes.
incentivizing psychologists to really have
Right.
a big sense of self-awareness towards their own practice. And the
Mm-hmm.
example that you gave was, during Nazi Germany, we had skilled medical doctors that
Mm-hmm.
really worked hard to try to create a healthier society, but then they were
Mm-hmm.
used to create ultimately horrific things in regards to the
Yes.
genocide that occurred during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we have
Right.
what you mentioned in modern day society, or at least within the past couple of decades, is we've had psychologists who have been trained and they studied to help the minds of individuals and society. But some of them have been using their knowledge and what they know about psychology to,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, torture people in certain
Yes.
jails,
Yes.
like Guantanamo Bay. And so I think
Yes.
it's really important. With great power comes great responsibility. And so for people that are
Responsibility. Yes.
coming out, I love how
Right.
you
And I think
mentioned that.
that, one thing that people don't understand maybe about cypherpunks is that I call cypherpunks as cryptographer with ethics,
Hmm.
and that they are the one who use the knowledge of science for the betterment of humanity. So, we all have, like, it's computer scientist or psychologist, or, those who are equipped with knowledge. We are given a choice, I think, in our life as to how we can use the knowledge. Are we going to use knowledge and skills to emancipate humanity, or are we going to use it to control and oppress humanity? And I think the cypherpunks, what makes cypherpunks the great, in my opinion, is the ethics,
Hmm.
that their belief in humanity, that they don't elevate themselves above the rest of humanity. They're there with us. They are serving for us, ordinary people who don't have this skill. And I think this was beautifully exemplified by Julian Assange, in my opinion. Julian Assange, as being the one of notable cypherpunks, he is the great embodiment, example of somebody, who used the knowledge for the betterment of humanity. And because of it, of course, he paid a price. Has been imprisoned. Still he's suffering in prison. But I think that Bitcoin is so revolutionary because it's this incentive, as we talked about, just changing the incentives, just deploying the code, right? Just deploying the code into the world, and the incentives that are coded in it, in a piece of mathematics, that would change us to act differently. And that
Mm-hmm.
the force that changes us to act differently is distributed across network. So it's not like we are being coerced to act differently. Each person can choose out
Mm-hmm.
of our own freedom to change our behavior. And this, this incentives, this change in incentives in our society is doing the miracle, in my opinion. Now we're only seeing just the tip of the iceberg, and that we would be amazed, I think, over the next decades, what this invention of money meant for us as human beings. And it really, cypherpunks provided the mechanism to change the world without taking the power,
Right.
and there are no levers of control. Nobody is telling us how to behave differently. It's just allowing us, giving us a choice, giving us freedom to, to choose different type of incentives, I guess. So
Yeah.
that's just simply amazing. Anytime I look at Bitcoin, this just I'm just in awe of this technology.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
It's a pure genius.
yeah, it's a never ending, it seems to me at least, it's a
Mm-hmm.
never ending learning path.
Yes.
It's this modern technological miraculous conception.
Yes, it is miraculous. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that yeah, it brings me a lot of hope for changing our incentive structure, and for
Mm-hmm.
hopefully bringing more accountability to our government, the CIA, the
Yes.
FBI. When you remarked on how this cryptography has in Bitcoin's code, and the network, its decentralization, all these properties, how it changes human incentives. It's amazing, yeah, to even think about. For people to get a quick glimpse of an example, it's if you have an infinite supply of money, and it's in the that's in the power and grasp for politicians to implement at any moment. Let's print a certain amount of money. This is essentially subconsciously it's subconsciously within the politicians, allowing them to not really have a strategic mindset in a way, right? So if you have a very limited, scarce supply of money, like if you're playing a game of poker and you only have a certain amount of chips left, you're going to behave differently. You're going to think differently. You're going to strategize in a different way. And so, yeah, I mean, that is something that really hit me hard and made me realize that, yes, this is going to cause this behavioral change within our institutions in our
Yes.
federal government. So I was
Mm-hmm.
very, very pleased to discover that alongside my journey and learning about Bitcoin overall.
Right. And in a sense that, I think once we understand Bitcoin, we start to recognize how economic forces are used to make us not be able to act in a certain way, right? So the economic forces are creating certain incentives, and that and then people focus on changing the incentives. That political activists, they are trying to change incentives, so they are kind of engaged in petitioning or campaigning and things, and then they try to influence policies, but unless you change the incentives, nothing can change. The economics behind the support incentives, nothing can fundamentally be changed. And I think Bitcoin really changed that. Bitcoin at the fundamental core changed money. So then, introduced the new incentives, and we are actually starting to free ourselves.
Yeah, and we get to see this play out in El Salvador. We get to see this play out in
Yes.
different countries, and I'm sure you've heard of Alex Gladstein, how he speaks to, developing nations that are prey to the International Monetary Fund, I
Yes,
believe the IMF.
economic hitmen, right?
Yeah, they're loan
Basically,
predators.
right. So it's the U.S. They go to those countries and then they corrupt the government, right? And that was documented by John Perkins' book, The Economic Hitman. I don't know if you are familiar with the book, but
yeah, no, I
that's their
haven't.
tactics,
Yeah, essentially.
So it has been well documented how the U.S. was involved in oppressing countries, in South America, for instance, and then they shifted their attention. I mean, they focused in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
Engaged in the more military intervention, as opposed to kind of financial exploitation that was done in South America. So the money has been used as an instrument of control and oppression, and the money that this whole creation of petrodollar hegemony, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how the United States can function as maintain its empire status is through petrodollar hegemony. Mm-hmm. And if we get rid of that, basically, if we get rid of the Fed's ability to print money infinitely, war would end. There's no more. Yeah. No more wars. I mean,
war. Okay, I thought you said the world would end. I was like, what?
World would end would be So war would end.
Yeah. I mean, that's hopefully something that will happen within our lifetimes too. I'm not entirely sure.
I'm hopeful. I think.
Yeah.
I think there will be.
Yeah. So I've seen on your Twitter, your banner, your background is the Renaissance 2.0. And I was wondering, it seems like you're a contributor to this new Renaissance. And I was wondering if you could just kind of describe this Renaissance, how maybe you're planning on contributing to this new Enlightenment period in which we can create different, for you specifically, you're writing, but other people are creating. I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the Twitter profiles out there is the Crypto Couple, but they focus on these creative videos that are very attractive for new people to kind of like dive into and show educationally what's actually going on, but like in a funny and dramatic way. And so, I noticed that about your profile and was wondering,
right,
how, like, what are your next steps and what you've been working on?
Well, I think that when I, first, I was aware of transhumanism agendas since like 2015. And I dig into it when I first found out about it. I was simply curious what that is. And so for those of you who don't know what transhumanism is that, transhumanism is like a global intellectual movement that has emerged for the last 2 decades or so. Mm-hmm. And so proponent of transhumanism, they wanted to change human beings and overcome, I think, biological limitations that we have, such as like aging or disease, and or even the experience of death itself. That they wanted to overcome them by means of technological intervention. So they use like bioengineering techniques or robotics, or the techniques to merge human beings with the machine, that they somehow wanted to kind of, enhance humanity. Like they call that as an enhancement. So when I first found out about this, I just could not believe it. I just felt there is something wrong with this picture, that somehow that we will be turned into a robot, or like what's good about us becoming robotic? Or what's good about, for me, like what's good about living forever? or just living in a virtual reality, and not even like have a connection with our body. And so I started to question, there's a whole premise. And then I strongly felt that this is something that I cannot agree with, and that I just think that they are not understanding the essence of what it means to be human.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to see how the people who are behind the CBDCs and who are pushing CBDCs, that they are the one who push forward this transhumanism agendas, and then how Bitcoin present alternative, and that the humanistic ideas at the core of Bitcoin, it's something that I started to recognize that there at the core of Bitcoin there is this humanistic ideas, and that Bitcoin is pro-human technology, and that I wanted to defend Bitcoin. I wanted to defend human values. And so initially, like, I thought that it's important. I felt it's important to use my skills to inform people about what transhumanism agendas are, because for some reason, transhumanism agendas are not really talked about in social media, for instance. Like we hear bits and kind of things and ideas around it, but then the idea of transhumanism itself hasn't quite hit, I think, the mainstream consciousness or whatever, So I thought that maybe I need to kind of focus on articulating what that is, and then how Bitcoin presented an alternative, and clearly showing the difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
But then eventually it dawned on me that the way to resist against transhumanism agenda is not just to inform public about it, but each of us start actively engaged in the art of being human. So then for me, I just felt that I first need to maybe understand what it means to be human. And I need to start to learn, I think, what it means to be human with other human beings. So that kind of inspired me to, so that was kind of like the thought that I started to have. And then I heard Stacey Harvard talks about Renaissance 2.0. I think she's the one who first coined the term Renaissance 2.0, and especially in connection to what's happening in El Salvador. Mm-hmm. And that, basically it's the resurgence of arts and a new renaissance of humanism that are happening around the Bitcoin, and that people are, the artists, like if you look at the Bitcoin space, it's a flourishing of freedom of expression. You see this artist painting of Bitcoin, or people inspired with this new invention of money, that they started to create artistic work, whether that is a song or painting, and I'm being friends with singers. I'm actually starting up a new podcast called Bitcoin's Love with a musician based in London, Roger 9000. And then I don't know if you know him, but and then also I'm pairing up with faceless artist that goes by Painting Bitcoin. I met him in El Salvador last November during the Adapting Bitcoin conference. Mm-hmm. And so so he and I painted Bitcoin, and I just clicked. I mean, we connected immediately. And then he's a painter. He's the painter who created the banner, by the way, on Twitter. And we share some of our passion and ideals, and decided that I want to do something just more than just writing about something. I wanted to be a part of maybe making history, and I think in many ways, I have in this space, I have documented history that is happening, and then the people who make history, they are Max Kaiser, Stacey Hubbard, Samson Mao, that they are the ones who are on the front line in this space, that they are very active. They are pushing forward the changes that are necessary. And then I think that in my modest way that I was trying to document what they're doing as a part of history.
Yeah.
And so, I was waiting. They are the ones who act, and then, so then I can write about them. And but now I feel like I want to be a part of not just recording history, but I want to be actively engaged in making history. So that kind of led me to, let me to trying to find a way to be a part of Renaissance 2.0. So I'm kind of launching the podcast now and wanted to create an event around it with the theme of Renaissance 2.0, and then maybe engage Bitcoiners in the art of being human, because I think us knowing what it means to be human and claiming what it means human by simply, being that, being joyful and creative and imaginative. I think that is the most important thing. That would, I think, counter transhumanism agendas, So instead of like fighting against them or whatever, we simply just be human, just be alive. So that's kind of like I came to a conclusion, a kind of a conclusion that that's what I need to do as a next step. And obviously, I'm not that kind of a social person, I don't like to be in front of people talking. And I have, for a long time, I was even like shining away from any podcast interviews. I didn't like to talk, I feel more comfortable just sitting in my room alone writing. But now I'm going to come out of the shell and try to just, be a part of this Renaissance 2.0, I guess.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And if you were to create a Renaissance 2.0 event, I think it'd be honestly a hell of a lot better than the Miami conference. It will just have more of like a one, it'll be focused on Bitcoin, but then creativity and human, individual human creativity. So if you do create some kind of event, please let me know, which I follow you, so I'll be able to find out. But that would be really cool. I think it would be a great way to get Bitcoiners together and then also have these different forms of expression through art or whatever it may be. So I love to see that. And I think that creating, this channel of being able to express yourself through art will even spread the message in a more impactful way. Some people, unfortunately, nowadays don't have the attention span to, read certain blogs. There's just these 90-second reels that people will just they just keep scrolling. Right? TikTok is kind of programming us to have much less patience. So I think that is a great move for yourself, just to empower yourself, but also to be able to spread the message.
As a complete idea, I kind of entertained the idea of doing poetry slam. Do you know spoken word poetry slam?
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I used to do that. There are some places in the Bay Area, and I used to get up on the stage and do the poetry slam. And I thought, wow, this is the art that I want to bring to the Bitcoin community. And I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to just think about it and see if I can do that.
Oh, you definitely can.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, that I think is a great way to conclude. I wanted to, before we end here, you want to display, where people can find you and your work, and where it seems like it might be Twitter, but there might be other forms of.
Yes, the Twitter is the best way. When I write articles, you can find my new articles there. And then also you can subscribe to my Substack, The Way of the Heart. You can find the link on my Twitter. And also I'm a frequent contributor to the Bitcoin magazine. So you might, find my new articles there.
Great.
And then my Twitter handle is at Nozomi Imagine.
Yeah. Yep. And I will link all of this in the show notes. Nozomi, thank you so much for
Thank
joining. I
you.
really had a pleasure talking to you, and I hope
Oh,
to
thank you for
continue
having
to
me.
yeah, I hope to continue to talk to you in the future too
Yes.
as you progress with your with your writing and what you've been contributing.
Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. All right.